They came for her at the edge of the Selvan Reach, where the old star lanes go dark and even the beacons forget to blink. I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest. In the whole spread of the settled galaxy, there was one rule everybody followed without being told. You did not go into the deep between Selvan and the Ashfold. Not because there was a law. Laws are for places people care about. You didn't go because things lived out there that had learned, a long time ago, that ships were soft and full of warm meat. We called them the Dreeth. Nobody knew if that was their name for themselves or just a sound the first survivors made trying to describe them. Doesn't matter. When you heard it, you got quiet. And this is a story about the night the Dreeth made the worst mistake a hunter can make. They picked the wrong prey. They just didn't know it yet. Let me back up. My name is Oren Tass. I keep the records for the Selvan Way Station, which is a fancy way of saying I sit in a rusted ring of metal bolted to a dead moon, and I write down who comes and who goes. Most nights nobody comes. Most nights I talk to the coffee machine, which is broken, and I lose. 12 years I've done this. You learn to read a ship by its engine hum the way a farmer reads weather. You learn the sound of trouble before you see it. That night I heard trouble a full hour early. It came in as a distress ping, but wrong. Too clean. Royal cipher, the kind you only see on official Ilthari craft, and out here that's like finding a crown in a garbage chute. The Ilthari were old money, old blood. Their homeworld sits 3 jumps coreward, all silver spires and gardens that grow on nothing. Their nobility didn't fly through the Reach. Their nobility didn't know the Reach existed except as a smudge on a map somebody's tutor pointed at once. So I sat up, I wiped my hands on my shirt, I opened the channel. Selvan Way Station, I said. You're a long way from anywhere, friend. State your situation. Static, then a voice. And I'll tell you, I've heard a lot of scared people over 12 years. Miners who cut a corner too close. Smugglers watching a patrol boat wake up. You develop an ear for the different flavors of fear. This wasn't panic. This was worse. This was the flat, careful calm of somebody who has already accepted they're going to die and is only talking to you because there's nothing else to do with their hands. This is the Ilthari vessel Sunlit Hollow, the voice said, female, steady in a way that made the back of my neck go cold. We are carrying Her Highness Seren Vale, third daughter of the Ilthari line. We have lost our escort. We have lost 2 engines. A pause. We are being followed. I asked the question you're not supposed to ask, because you already know the answer and asking makes it real. Followed by what? And she didn't say Dreeth. She didn't have to. She just went quiet, and in the quiet I heard something behind her voice, deep in the ship's hull, a sound I'd only heard once before and hoped I'd die without hearing again. A long, wet, patient scraping, like something enormous dragging itself along the outside of the ship. Testing. Tasting. Get to me, I said, my voice cracked, I didn't care. You get to me, you hear, I've got shields, get to me. I didn't have anything that could stop a Dreeth pack. Nobody did. I knew it and she knew it. But you say it anyway. You say come to me because the alternative is telling somebody to die alone in the dark, and I wasn't built for that. Here's the part I keep coming back to. Because in that same hour on the far edge of my scanner, there was one other ship in the Reach. Just one. A little scarred hunter-class boat, no bigger than a fishing trawler, running black with its transponder off. I'd clocked it 3 days back and left it alone, because ships that run dark out here are either dead or dangerous, and either way you don't poke them. That little black boat had heard the same distress ping I had. And it had already turned. Now I have to tell you about the boy, except he wasn't a boy anymore, and I only call him that because of how the story starts. His name was Cade, just Cade. He never gave a second name, and nobody who mattered ever asked for one. He was human. And I know that's the part you clicked for, so let me not be coy about it. He was human out in a stretch of nothing where humans had no business being, and there's a reason for that, and the reason is the whole heart of this. You have to understand what humans were in the wider galaxy back then. Not much, that's the truth of it. We came up late. We came up loud. We came out of a gravity well that would have crushed half the delegates who first met us, off a world with weather that killed things for sport, and the polite species looked at us the way you'd look at a dog that had somehow learned to sit at the dinner table. Impressed, uneasy, keeping the good silverware out of reach. They didn't fear us for our ships. Our ships were junk. They didn't fear us for our numbers. We were a handful of colonies clinging to the underside of the map. They feared us for something they couldn't put in a report, the way we didn't stop, the way a human would keep walking toward a thing that every instinct in every civilized body screamed to run from. They had a word for it in the trade tongue, a word that doesn't translate clean. Closest I can give you is unquittable. And of all the unquittable things a human could do, Cade had picked the worst one. He hunted Dreeth. For a living on purpose, alone. There were maybe 9 people in the whole galaxy who did what Cade did, and 8 of them worked in teams with heavy weapons and orbital support and a chaplain on standby. Cade worked with a knife the length of his forearm, a rifle he'd built himself out of parts that shouldn't fit together, and a boat named, I found this out later, and it broke something in me, the second chance. He didn't hunt for money, though the bounties were obscene. He didn't hunt for glory, nobody knew his face. He hunted because 11 years before this night, the Dreeth had taken everything he had, and a man like that doesn't get better. He just gets pointed. But that's not the part that matters yet. The part that matters is why an Ilthari princess and a human monster hunter were in the same dead corner of space on the same dying night. Because Cade wasn't just any human. Cade was hers. 22 years before, give or take, the Ilthari line had a scandal they buried so deep even I only learned it in fragments, and I'm the man who keeps the records. Seren Vale, third daughter, had done a thing no Ilthari of the blood was supposed to do. She'd gone out. Not politically, not on a diplomatic barge with 100 handlers. She'd slipped her escort as a young woman and gone wandering the low ports, the mixed stations, the places where species that civilization kept separate actually rubbed shoulders and made each other's lives interesting. And in one of those ports she'd met a human, a cargo pilot. Rough hands, easy laugh. A man who talked to a princess like she was a person, because he genuinely didn't know she wasn't just a person. I don't know his name. She never wrote it down anywhere I could find, and I think that was on purpose, and I think it was love, not shame. Some things you keep by not naming them. The Ilthari can't have children with humans. Everybody knows that. Different worlds, different everything. That's not opinion, that's biology, that's a wall you don't climb. Except the galaxy is very large and biology is very old and impossible, is a word people use for things they haven't seen yet. It shouldn't have happened. It happened. She carried, and it nearly killed her, and when it was over she had a son who was half of one thing and half of another and belonged fully to neither. And the Ilthari court looked at that child the way you'd look at a crack in a wall you'd sworn was solid. They didn't kill him. I'll give them that much and no more. They did something colder. They erased him. Seren was told in the gentle, merciless way that old power tells you things, that the child could live or the child could be Ilthari, but not both. So she made a choice that I've turned over in my head 1,000 times and still can't judge. She gave him away to keep him alive. She sent him out to the human colonies, to the loud, late-coming apes at the bottom of the map, and she let the court record her son as stillborn. And then she went back to being a princess, and she smiled at galas, and she never spoke his name, and every single year on the day he'd been born she went somewhere alone and came back with her eyes red and told everyone it was allergies. The cargo pilot, he raised the boy for a while. Then the Dreeth got his hauler on a bad run through a bad lane, and the pilot didn't come home, and the boy, 11 years old, half alien, all alone at a colony's edge, learned the 2 lessons that would make him what he became. That the monsters were real, and that nobody was coming to save you, so you'd better learn to be the thing that saves. He never knew his mother was a princess. He knew she'd given him up. That was the wound. He'd spent his whole life believing she hadn't wanted him. He was wrong, but he didn't know that yet either. And now, 22 years later, on the worst night the Reach had seen in a generation, the Dreeth were dragging their claws along the hull of a ship carrying a woman he'd never met and hated in the abstract way you hate a story you were told about yourself. He didn't know who was on that ship. He'd answered the distress ping because it said children were aboard her retinue, servants, a young cousin. Cade never let the Dreeth have children. That was the one line even his grief respected. He turned the second chance toward the sunlit hollow because it was the right thing to do. He had no idea he was flying toward his mother. Neither did she. That's the kind of thing that only happens once in the whole life of the stars, and I got to watch it. God help me, I got to watch the whole thing. Let me tell you what a Dreeth is, not the campfire version, the real one. I saw the scans off the sunlit hollow before her sensors died. I've kept them. Sometimes I look at them when I need to remember to be grateful for the boring dark. They're big. That's the first wrong thing. Bigger than they have any right to be for something that moves that fast. Long-bodied, segmented, built for the vacuum the way a shark is built for water, so at home in the killing cold that they don't even seem to notice it. They don't breathe air. They don't want your air. They want the warm thing inside your ship, and they will peel your ship like fruit to get to it. They hunt in packs of 6 to 9. They're smart, that's the second wrong thing and the worst one. Not tool smart, worse than that. They're pattern smart, they herd. They cut off escape lanes. They'll damage your engines but not your life support on purpose because a panicking crew makes better noise and they follow noise the way you'd follow the smell of bread. They toyed with the sunlit hollow for 6 hours. They could have killed her in 20 minutes. They didn't want to. That's what was outside the princess's window. 9 of the smartest predators the galaxy ever grew, taking their time, savoring it, dragging their claws across the glass so the soft things inside would hear it and understand. And into that, one little black boat came falling out of the dark with its lights off, and a human at the helm who had done this 40 times before, and had the scars to prove all 40. Selvan, this is Sunlit Hollow. The steady voice again, the captain. She'd been talking to me in bursts for an hour whenever she could spare the attention. I think she needed a witness. People do at the end. There's another ship. It's not answering hails. It's coming right at us. Small. It's not a Dreeth, it's a ship, but it's not slowing down. Selvan, is this yours? It's not mine, I said. My hands were flat on the console. But I think it's help. Nobody comes into the Reach to help, she said. Not bitter. Just tired, just statting the physics of her world. And then a new voice cut into the channel. First time I'd heard it. Flat, calm, a little rough, like a man who didn't use it much. Human. You could hear the human in it, that unquittable thing, right there in the vowels. Sunlit Hollow, cut your running lights, all of them now. The captain hesitated. Who is? You want to live, cut your lights. They're tracking your emissions. You're screaming at them. Go dark and they lose their fix for about 90 seconds. That's my window. Do it. There was a pause where I could feel her weighing it, this stranger's certainty against everything she knew, and then I heard it in the channel, that little subsonic drop when a ship's systems power down. She did it. She trusted the voice. Sometimes that's all courage is. Trusting a voice in the dark because the light was killing you anyway. Good, the human said. Now everyone aboard gets small and gets quiet. No power spikes. No comms unless it's life or death. You've got a princess on there. Oh, yes. She stays farthest from the hull. Doesn't matter which room's nicest. Farthest from the outside. Move her now. Who are you? The captain asked again. And this time it wasn't suspicion. It was the question you ask when you want to know whose name to say when you pray. Long silence. When he answered, he didn't answer that. I'm the guy who's going to make them wish they'd stayed hungry, he said. Kill your channel, I mean it. After this, you're silent until I tell you otherwise. The sunlit hollow went quiet. And I sat in my rusted ring on a dead moon, watching two dots on a scanner, one small and dark and closing fast, one dying and silent, and around them 9 larger shapes that had just, for the first time in 6 hours, lost sight of their food. You want to know what a human looks like when he hunts a dreith? I only pieced it together after from the Second Chance's own logs, which Cade had rigged to record everything, not for glory, I think, but so that if the day came that one of these got him, there'd be a record for the next fool who tried. A manual written in blood for people he'd never meet. That was Cade. Even his death was going to be useful to somebody. He didn't come in shooting, that's the first thing. Any idiot comes in shooting. The dreith expect shooting. They fold around it, they scatter and reform. They've eaten 100 crews that came in shooting. Cade came in cold, engine off, coasting on momentum through the black with every system dark, a hunk of dead metal falling through their patrol pattern, indistinguishable from debris. He'd cut his own life support to shave the heat signature. He was breathing recycled air out of a suit tank inside his own ship, sitting in the cold and the dark, letting the dreith swim right past him because a corpse ship doesn't register as a threat. He drifted for 11 minutes. 11 minutes in the freezing dark, close enough to the pack that the log picked up the sound of them scraping across his hull too, that same wet, patient dragging. One of them running its claws along the Second Chance the way you'd tap a melon at market. Testing. And Cade sat inside, not moving, not breathing loud, letting the monster taste his boat and lose interest. Do you understand what that takes? To sit still while the thing that murdered your family runs its claws across the wall 6 inches from your face, and not flinch, not fire, not do anything but wait for the better shot. That's the unquittable thing. That's what the polite species couldn't put in their reports. It's not that humans are brave. Lots of species are brave. It's that a human will outweigh his own terror. He'll sit in the dark with a monster and let his heart hammer itself raw and still not move until the moment is exactly right. The moment came when the pack refixed on the sunlit hollow, when they gave up on the cold, dead boat and turned their attention back to the warm, silent one, bunching up, closing in for the peel, all 9 of them for just a few seconds, lined up between Cade and the princess's ship with their backs to the debris. That's when the dead boat woke up. I saw it on my scanner as a single hard flare. 1 second, 9 predators and 2 ships. The next, the little dark dot lit up like a struck match and the whole tableau came apart. Cade dumped his entire power core into one burn and one shot. The Second Chance came off the debris drift like it had been fired from a sling, and the rifle he'd built out of impossible parts spat something down the length of the pack that I still don't fully understand. Some overloaded lance of energy meant to do to a dreith's segmented spine what the dreith did to a ship's hull. Peel it. Open it up along the seam. The lead predator came apart in the dark. Just came apart, silent, the way everything dies in vacuum. No scream, no sound, just a thing that was whole and then wasn't. And the other 8 turned. Here's the moment, if you want the moment. Here's the exact second the story turns from a rescue into something older and stranger. Because a dreith pack, when you kill their leader, doesn't panic. They're too smart to panic. They reassess. And for the first time in 6 hours, they looked away from the soft, screaming ship they'd been playing with, and they looked at the small, dark thing that had just killed one of them from ambush, and something in whatever passes for their minds recalculated. New prey, better prey, prey that fought back. The dreith love prey that fights back. It's the only thing that isn't boring. All 8 of them peeled off the sunlit hollow and went for the Second Chance. Which, and I want to be clear that I understood this only later, staring at the logs with my coffee going cold, was exactly, precisely, down to the second, what Cade wanted. He'd killed one to make himself interesting. He'd made himself interesting to pull them off her. He was one man in a fishing boat deliberately drawing 8 of the deadliest things in the galaxy onto himself, away from a ship full of strangers, because that was the job, and the job was the only thing he had left that meant anything. He didn't know it was his mother's ship. He'd have done it anyway, that's the part that guts me. He'd have done it for anybody, but it was hers. And on the sunlit hollow, pressed into the deepest interior room, farthest from the hull like the stranger's voice had told her, a princess who'd spent 22 years pretending her son was dead felt her ruined ship suddenly go still, felt the scraping stop, felt the monsters leave, and had no idea none that the reason she was still breathing was the child she'd given away. I need to slow down here, because what happened next took maybe 4 minutes, and I've spent years living inside those 4 minutes, and if I rush them you won't feel what I felt. 8 Dreeth, 1 boat, and Cade did not run. He could have. The burn that killed the leader had also broken him free of the pack, given him a clean lane back toward my station, toward shields and beacons and the illusion of safety. Any sane pilot takes that lane. You killed one, you saved the ship, you got a bounty and a story and you go home. Cade didn't go home. Cade didn't have a home. The Dreeth had taken it 11 years ago. So Cade did the thing that made the galaxy afraid of us. He turned into them. The second chance came around hard, shedding heat, its one working engine screaming past every limit it was built for, and it went back into the pack. On purpose. A man alone, into 8 of them, in a boat with a cracked power core, and a rifle that needed 90 seconds to charge between shots and a knife for when the rifle ran dry. I've replayed the log of the next 3 minutes more times than is healthy. I can describe it beat by beat. But I don't think the beats are the point. The point is what it sounded like. Because Cade left his comm channel open. Not to talk, he wasn't talking. He'd have told you it was an accident, a switch he didn't flip. I don't believe that. I think some part of him, way down under the grief and the training and the cold, wanted somebody to hear. Wanted a witness, same as the captain did. We all want a witness at the end. Even the ones who have made peace with dying alone. So I heard it. I heard the whole thing. I heard him breathing, hard and even, that trained breath that keeps your hands steady when your body wants to shake. I heard the rifle charge and fire, and each time it fired I heard him already moving, already turning, because you never take the shot and admire it. You take the shot and you're gone before the answer comes. I heard the boat groan as he threw it through maneuvers it wasn't rated for. I heard twice the horrible closeness of a Dreeth's claws on the hull, that wet dragging scrape, and both times I heard him not stop, not flinch, just keep breathing and keep working the problem. And once I heard him talk, not to me, not to the princess, to them. "Come on," he said, quiet, almost gentle, the way you'd coax a scared animal. "Come on, I'm right here. You want warm meat, I'm right here. Leave them, come get me. Leave them, come get me." He didn't know who them was. It was just the word for the people behind him, the people he was standing in front of, because that's what he did, that's what he'd made himself into after the Dreeth took his father, the thing that stands in front. The last thing before the dark. The monster hunter who'd become in the space where his family used to be, a shape built entirely out of one refusal, not again. Not while I'm breathing, not one more. 3 of the 8 died in those 3 minutes. I counted the flares. 3 more of them came apart silent in the black, and the second chance took hits doing it. I watched pieces of her come off on the scanner, watched her heat signature start to gutter as systems failed, and still he didn't break off, still that even breathing in my ear, still the rifle charging and firing, slower now, the cracked core taking longer each time to give him his 90 seconds. 5 Dreeth left, 1 boat falling apart, 1 man. And then the rifle didn't charge. I heard it. I heard the click that wasn't a shot. I heard Cade breathe out once, long and slow, the breath of a man who has just watched his last card turn out to be a blank. The core was done. No more lance. No more 90 seconds. Just a broken boat and a knife, and 5 of them still out there in the dark, reforming, cutting off his lanes, hurting him the way they'd hurted the princess, because that's what they do to prey that's finally run out of teeth. And into that silence, the worst silence I'd heard yet, worse than the captain's, worse than anything, the princess's ship came back to life. The sunlit hollow lit her running lights. Every one of them, full and bright, a star suddenly in the dark corner of the reach where nothing was supposed to shine. She lit herself up like a torch, on purpose. She screamed at them in the only language the Dreeth understood, the language of emissions and heat, and here I am. Here I am. Here is warm meat. Come and get it. She pulled them off her son. She didn't know he was her son. Understand that. She still didn't know. All she knew was that a stranger had come out of nowhere and put himself between her ship and the monsters, and now that stranger was dying, and she was an Elthari princess who had spent 22 years being brave in small private ways, crying in closets, smiling at galas, carrying a grief nobody was allowed to see. And here finally was a thing she could do that was loud, that was real, that mattered. She lit her ship and she made herself the prey again, and the captain's voice came over the channel, that steady voice cracking at last, saying, "Human, if you can still hear me. Her Highness says, she says get clear. She says the Ilthari do not let others die for them, she says." And the voice stopped, because the captain was crying now too, and finished in a whisper. "She says thank you, whoever you are. She says thank you and go." I have to stop for a second, even now telling it. Give me a second. Because on the second chance, the human who'd been breathing so steady, so trained, so unbreakable through all of it, I heard his breath catch. He'd heard the word, Ilthari. And something in it, some thread 22 years long, some story he'd been told as a child about the world he half belonged to, the world that had thrown him out, the mother who hadn't wanted him. Something in that word Ilthari went into Cade like a hook. He keyed the channel, first time he'd spoken to them directly since the start. "Say that again," he said, and his voice wasn't flat anymore. "Who's on that ship? Say the name again." The captain, confused, grief-drunk, said it. "Her Highness Seren Vale, third daughter of the..." Seren. Just the name. Just her name in his mouth in the dark from a man who I would learn had heard exactly one story about his mother his whole life. One story from the cargo pilot who raised him. A story that ended she was Ilthari. She was Seren. She couldn't keep you. And I'm sorry, son, but she let you go. Seren. The odds of it. The impossible, obscene, once in the life of the stars odds of it. A galaxy so wide you could pour every human who ever lived into it and lose them like sand. And the one distressed ping Cade answered, in the one dead corner of the reach. On the one night his broken boat happened to be drifting close enough to hear. It was her. It was hers. The mother who gave him up to keep him alive was about to die, lighting herself on fire to save a stranger who was her son. And now he knew. And she still didn't. I'm going to end this part here, and I know that's cruel, but so is the story, so is the whole shape of it, and I'd be lying to you if I pretended the night turned kind at that moment. It didn't. The math was the same. 5 Dreeth. A broken boat. A princess with her lights blazing, drawing them onto herself. A son with an empty rifle and a knife, and the name of his mother suddenly ringing in his skull like a struck bell. I'll tell you what he did with that. I'll tell you all of it, how it ended, what she said when she finally understood, and the thing he did in the last 90 seconds that the Dreeth had never seen a human do before, the thing that made even those old smart monsters, for the first time in their long, cruel lives, hesitate. But first, sit with this. Sit with the moment. 22 years, she'd carried a son she wasn't allowed to name. And he just, in a dead boat over a dying channel, said her name for the first time and turned his broken ship around, one more time, not away from the monsters. Toward her. Toward her. He turned the second chance toward the sunlit hollow, and this time he wasn't turning to draw the monsters off. He was turning to reach her, to reach the ship, to close the distance between 22 years of come and get me. I'm right here and the one person who'd never come. But you can't just fly to someone across a battlefield made of vacuum and teeth. The Dreeth were between them, 5 of them, and they'd stopped playing. Somewhere in whatever they used for minds, they'd finally understood that tonight's prey was different, that the small warm things weren't running the way prey was supposed to run, that they were turning, lighting up, throwing themselves in front of each other. And the Dreeth did the thing that made them the apex of the whole Dark Reach. They got serious. They stopped toying. They formed up tight around the sunlit hollow, the blazing, screaming, defenseless ship the princess had lit like a beacon, and they went in for the peel. All five. Fast, coordinated, done playing. In maybe 40 seconds they were going to open that hull to the black, and every warm thing inside it, the servants and the young cousin and the steady-voiced captain and the mother, was going to end. And Cade had an empty rifle. I want to tell you he had a plan. Cade always had a plan. That was the whole architecture of him, the cold, patient math that let a man drift 11 minutes in the freezing dark. But I've listened to the log 100 times and I don't think he planned this part. I think this part came from somewhere the plans don't reach. He put the second chance on a ram course. Not at a Dreeth, at the gap, at the narrow closing space between the pack and the sunlit hollow's hull. He aimed his dying boat, his home, the second chance, the only thing he had left in the whole galaxy that was his, at the sliver of dark between the monsters and his mother, and he opened the channel to the princess's ship, and he said the thing. He said it fast because there wasn't time, but he said all of it. Seren, your son didn't die. They lied to you or they lied to somebody, but he didn't die. He grew up, he's here, it's me, I'm the boat. I'm the human, I found you. I'm sorry it took so long. Get to your escape pods, I'm making you a door, and Seren, I never blamed you. Whatever they told you I felt, I never blamed you. You kept me alive. You're doing it again right now. Go. And he flew his boat into the gap. I've thought a long time about what that was. What he actually did in the last 90 seconds that even the Dreeth had never seen. You have to understand the Dreeth had eaten humans before. We weren't new to them. They knew what we tasted like, knew we fought, knew we didn't quit. That was already in their bones, the unquittable thing. It's part of why the polite species stayed away and the Dreeth didn't. The Dreeth liked us. We fought back. We were the good prey. But they'd never seen this. They'd seen humans fight to live. Every prey fights to live, that's just biology, that's the floor. What they'd never seen, what genuinely, for a moment, made those 5 old smart killers hesitate in the dark, was a human deliberately spend his own survival. Not risk it. Spend it. Fly a dying boat into a suicide gap, not to escape, not to kill, but to be a wall. To put his body, his whole boat, his whole self between the teeth and the warm thing behind him, and mean it and not flinch and burn. Prey doesn't do that. Prey runs. Prey that can't run fights. But prey cannot choose to become the shield. There's no evolutionary reason for it. It makes no sense. It's a thing that shouldn't exist in a universe run on survival, and the Dreeth, who understood survival the way we understand breathing, hit it like a wall they didn't know was there. The second chance went into the gap, and Cade blew his ruptured core on purpose. Not a weapon. He didn't have a weapon anymore. He blew the core the way you'd throw your own body down on something. A controlled overload, everything he had left, dumped outward in one blinding sphere of heat and light and shrapnel, right in the closing throat of the pack, right in the place the Dreeth had massed to peel the princess's ship. I saw it from my rusted ring on the dead moon. The whole scanner whited out. For a full second there was just a sun where there hadn't been one, a small hard star born and dying in the space between a monster and a mother. When it cleared, 3 of the 5 Dreeth were gone, just gone, come apart in the light. The other 2 were hurt, tumbling, scattered. The sunlit hollow was still there, scorched, spinning a little hull, screaming with alarms, but whole. Whole. He'd made the door, he'd made the wall, he'd spent everything, and the ship behind him was still there. And the second chance was gone. There's a silence on the log after that, a long one, the kind I'd been dreading since the first distress ping an hour and a lifetime before. I sat in my chair and I didn't breathe, because I'd heard him die. I was sure I'd heard him die. You spend the core, you're inside the blast, that's it, that's the end of the math, that's how the story ends. The human hero spends himself to save the innocents and the credits roll, and you're supposed to feel something noble about it, and mostly you just feel sick. The princess's channel was open. I could hear her now, finally, for the first time, not the captain, her, Seren, and she was not steady. She was not the careful, calm voice of somebody who'd made peace with dying. She was a mother who just heard her stillborn son say, "I'm the boat, I found you," and then watched the boat become a star. She was saying his name, the one she'd never been allowed to say, over and over, into a channel to a boat that wasn't there anymore. "I won't write what she said. Some things you don't put in a record. I keep the records, and even I know where the line is." And then 30 seconds in, 40, a new signal. Weak. Flickering. A suit beacon. The cheap emergency transponder built into a hunter's vacuum suit. The kind that's got about an hour of power and a range of nothing and exists only so that, after you die out here, somebody can find the body. It was pinging. Which meant the suit had power. Which meant Cade had punched out. In the last second, the last fraction before he blew the core, he'd blown the canopy and kicked himself clear out into the black in nothing but a suit, and let the boat go on without him into the blast. He'd spent the second chance. He hadn't spent himself. Not quite. Not this time. He was out there. Alive. A single fragile human-shaped thing tumbling in the dark of the reach with an hour of air, no boat, no rifle, nothing. And two hurt, furious Dreeth still alive somewhere in the same dark, and a princess's ship too crippled to maneuver, and a rescue that was, by every honest measure, still impossible. Here's where I did the only thing I ever did in this whole story. The only thing. I want you to know I know how small it was. I lit my station. Every light I had. Every beacon on the dead moon that had forgotten how to blink. I threw open the shield doors on my little rusted ring, and I broadcast on every channel, wide and loud and stupid, the emergency recall, the "come here you're safe" signal that I'd never once had a reason to use in 12 years. And I aimed my one tired tug, the little maintenance boat I used to nudge debris off the docking ring, out into the reach on autopilot toward that flickering suit beacon. It was nothing. A tug. It couldn't fight a Dreeth. It couldn't fight a strong breeze. But it could grab a floating man and it could bring him home, and sometimes that's the whole job. Sometimes you're not the hero. Sometimes you're just the guy who keeps the records and opens the door and says, get to me, and hopes it's enough. And the sunlit hollow, crippled, scorched, spinning, did the same. The captain fired the ship's last maneuvering fuel, everything she had not to run but to turn, to bring her wounded bulk around between the two surviving Dreeth and the drifting man, so that if the monsters came back, they'd have to come through her first. They both went for him. The princess's dying ship and my little tug, converging on one flickering beacon in the dark, two hulls making themselves into walls again, because it turned out the human hadn't invented that after all. He just reminded everyone it was possible. The Dreeth watched, both of them hurt, circling at the edge of the light. I could see them on the scanner, two shapes hesitating. And they left. They left, two of the deadliest predators the galaxy ever grew. Hurt but alive, with a man floating helpless in the open right there for the taking. And they turned and went back into the dark of the reach and didn't come back. I've never been sure why. I've got a theory. I think, and I know how it sounds, I think they'd finally learned the lesson the polite species learned centuries ago. That there's a kind of prey that costs more than it feeds you. That when the warm things start turning themselves into walls, start spending their survival to shield each other, start doing the thing that makes no evolutionary sense, you've wandered into the one corner of the galaxy that isn't worth the hunt. You go find something that runs. The Dreeth are smart, smart enough in the end to be afraid of the right thing. They left him alive. I think that might be the most human thing to ever happen to a Dreeth. The tug got to him first, 40 minutes of air left. I brought him in through the ring and I ran down to the dock myself. First time I'd run anywhere in years, and I hauled a half-frozen human out of a battered suit, and he looked up at me. First time I'd seen his face, and I want to tell you he looked like a legend, like the thing the bounty posters would have made him if he'd ever let them. But he didn't. He looked like a tired young man with old eyes and a scar through one eyebrow, and 11 years of grief sitting on him like a coat he'd forgotten he was wearing. Half Elthari, if you knew to look, something in the cheekbones, the faint silver under the skin. Mostly he just looked human. Mostly he just looked worn out. "Did the ship make it?" he said, before anything else, before he'd even fully caught his breath. "The sunlit hollow did it." "It made it," I said. "It's docking now, she made it, son." And I watched 22 years go through his face all at once. I wasn't in the room when they met. I want to be honest about that because there's a version of this story where I describe it, the mother and the son, the reunion, and I could do it. I've imagined it enough times, but I wasn't there and I don't lie in my records. They asked for the room. I gave them the room. Some things aren't for witnesses. I'll tell you the little I know, because it's the little that matters. I know she was already crying before the door opened because I heard it through the wall, and it wasn't the private allergies cry she'd hidden for 22 years. It was the other kind, the kind you're allowed. I know he stood in the doorway a long time. The captain told me later. Just stood there, this man who'd walked into 8 Dreath without flinching, frozen in a doorway because the one thing in the galaxy he'd never learned how to face was a mother who wanted him. I know the first thing she said, the captain heard this part too, before she stepped out and left them, was not "I'm sorry," though she said that later, 1,000 times for the rest of her life. The first thing Seren Vale said to her son was his name. Just his name. The one she'd carried for 22 years and never been allowed to say out loud. She said it like she was setting down something impossibly heavy she'd been holding the entire time. And I know because he told me, weeks later, one of the few times he ever talked about it, that he crossed the room and he didn't say any of the things he'd rehearsed his whole life. All the speeches. Why did you give me up? Did you ever look for me? Did you ever even once want me? He'd built those questions like weapons over 11 years and he put them all down in that room and never picked them up again. He said, "You lit the ship, when my rifle was empty. You lit the whole ship up to pull them off me. You didn't even know it was me and you did that." And she said, "I would have done it for a stranger." And he said, "I know. That's how I knew I was really yours." That's the whole thing. That's the story of the night the monsters hunted the alien princess and didn't know her human son was the monster hunter. But I've kept the records for 12 years and I've learned that the incident is never the whole story. The whole story is what it leaves behind. So let me tell you the small things, the true things, the things the bounty posters never carried. Seren Vale went back to the Ilthari court, but not quietly and not to smile at galas. She stood up in front of the old power that had made her give up her son to keep him alive, the cold, merciless, gentle power that had recorded a living boy as stillborn, and she told them the truth, all of it, out loud, in front of everyone. She told them a human had died and not died to save her, that he was her son, that she was done being ashamed of the one thing she'd ever done that was really hers. I heard it caused a scandal that made the old one look small. I heard some of them never spoke to her again. I heard she didn't care even a little. Cade never became a legend because he never let them make him one. He stopped hunting Dreath, not because the grief was gone, grief doesn't leave, but because the shape of him had been carved by not again, not one more, and he'd finally, impossibly, gotten to be the one who wasn't lost. It's hard to keep being a shield in the dark once you've got something to stand in the light for. Last I heard, he flies cargo now, same as the human who raised him, same as the father who taught him the monsters were real before the monsters took him. There's a rightness to that I don't have words for, the boy the Dreath made into a hunter, laying the hunt down and going back to the trade that started the whole thing. Rough hands, long hauls. A boat named, he told me this and I had to look away, the Second Chance. He named the new one the same. Because that's what he got, and he knew it, and he wasn't going to pretend otherwise. He visits the court sometimes. The half-human son the Ilthari tried to erase, walking their silver halls, and I'm told the young ones there look at him the way the galaxy always looked at humans, impressed, uneasy, keeping the good silverware out of reach. And every year, on the day he was born, his mother still goes somewhere alone. But now she comes back with her eyes red and doesn't lie about why. Now she just says, "I was thinking about my son." And nobody's allowed to tell her not to. I keep the records for the Selvonway station. 12 years now. 13. Most nights nobody comes. Most nights I talk to the coffee machine and I lose. But I keep one file separate from the rest. Not in the official log, just mine. It's the recording off the second chance, the open channel, the whole night, the breathing, the rifle, the "come on, I'm right here, leave them, come get me," and her lighting the ship, and him saying her name. Sometimes, when the reach is dark and the beacons have forgotten how to blink, and I start to believe the old lie that the galaxy is a cold place where the big things eat the small things, and that's all there is. I play it. And I remember that on one impossible night in the deadest corner of the dark, the monsters hunted a princess and didn't know her son was the hunter. And the son hunted the monsters and didn't know the princess was his mother. And in the middle of all that not knowing, both of them, without a word, did the same thing at the same time. They lit themselves up in the dark to save someone they thought was a stranger. That's the thing the monsters never understood about us. That's the thing the whole polite galaxy could never put in a report. It was never our ships, or our numbers, or even that we don't quit. It's that we'll be the wall, for anyone, every time. And once in a very long while, if you're very lucky, the stranger you burn for turns out to be the one you were looking for the whole time.